All right, again, live shots from around the country. Curfew is going to be imposed in many cities earlier tonight. You're looking at a shot of Boston right there. We've shown you both LA as well. That's a shot of Houston earlier today. Freddie Gray, I'm sorry, we had a scene that there was both a huge outpouring where both the police chief and also the mayor of the city greeted, the man who lost his life that really started all of this. He was a native son, came home, there was a huge crowd, and now you see some of the people, as I showed you a moment ago. The event is ended and Houston hopes for a quiet night. We will see more protests, but hopefully not more violence. Now, police in many cities, they're bracing for possibly another night, unfortunately, that resembled last night. We saw mayhem in many cities, and the hope is that it'll be avoided, but we shall see. We're also seeing remarkable solidarity at other moments in this crisis, like the highest-ranking uniformed officer in the NYPD kneeling with protesters in Washington Square Park last night. Chief of Department Terence Monahan, he not only embraced a protester, but he also gave a fiery speech.
The people who live in New York want New York to end the violence, get the intruders that are not from this city the hell out of here, and give us back our city. Get them out of here, throw them out of your protests, protest peacefully. Why would anyone break into a store in your neighborhood? Places that employ the people in this neighborhood. No reason for it. It has to end. Let New York show the country how this is done.
And many people can be watching because in New York, there is division between the governor and the mayor. The governor wanted to have a larger presence, including with the National Guard, after several successive nights here of peaceful daytime protesting that morphs into violence and looting as the evening progresses. Mayor de Blasio pushed back on that and said he didn't want the National Guard. We'll see if an increased police presence can make tonight a peaceful night. So many eyes will be on New York. And speaking of New York, let's bring in our guest, retired NYPD Detective Marq Claxton. He is Director of Public Relations for the Black Law Enforcement Alliance. I think that Chief said they're trying to make sense out of this, and there's so many different directions to go in. Thank you for a few minutes. Let's first start, before I get to where we are now and what you want to see in terms of meaningful reform. When you saw that video and when you saw what happened to George Floyd in Minnesota by not only Officer Chauvin, but the three other officers who just stood around, did your jaw drop, or had you seen things like that in your career?
My jaw didn't drop. It seems, unfortunately, like what we witnessed in the death of Mr. Floyd is a quite abominable but natural progression of the deterioration of the level of professionalism in law enforcement and understanding of human nature, the lack of empathy and the lack of respect for particular communities. And I'd say that unless we do something really revolutionary and progressive, we'll have more cases such as this, just as we've had in the past cases that kind of mirror this. And I'm talking specifically about the Eric Garner case in Everett.
Detective, I'm curious. Take us inside the precinct house when you were there. Is the problem that in the communities, we're talking primarily in the urban communities, a lot of these cops, police, they view it, and the people view them as us and them, and before they even get in the squad cars or go on patrol, that relationship is already set up potentially for failure? Or is it something else? How does this go? We've gotten to this point. Is it before they even do the policing that this kind of, adversarial relationship is there from jump?
Well, I had the opportunity to view a former chief of department of the NYPD, Philip Banks, on your show, and he pointed out exactly what it was, and that is the culture of policing, and how the culture of policing kind of warps what should be a natural, respectful, communicable relationship. And it kind of corrupts that and bastardizes that into us against them sort of mentality. And it really doesn't even matter about I've heard people before say, perhaps if police officers lived in the communities in which, they would police, or perhaps if you hired more black and brown police officers, things would be different. And I have to say that I don't necessarily agree with that. I think if you look at all indicators, the police culture subsumes even the culture that many officers come out of. So black and brown officers may come out of a particular community, but once they become police officers, far too many, not all, far too many become subsumed by police culture and engage in conduct that is more, pushing of the community away, conduct that seems to be overly abusive and disrespectful, and conduct that lacks empathy and too often does not acknowledge the humanity of other people. As sad as that is, that's just the reality. And we have an opportunity, I think, now to build and move away from that toxic police culture more towards a more progressive, community-based relationship.
I want to get to the solutions, Detective, but the here and now, what we've seen night after night. We just played the soundbite from the St. Louis police chief, who 4 of his guys are in a hospital because they got shot at. Listen, you forgot more than I ever know, but I'm really worried that some idiot with an assault rifle is going to do something, and it's not. We've already seen how little it takes to, throw a match on this and for something to blow up, and it turns into from a tragedy into something much worse. They got to get this under control at night, don't they? I mean, you saw the criticism Governor Cuomo had for Mayor de Blasio. You've seen pushback from the police union to the governor. What's the answer? I don't want what President Trump said yesterday, but at the same end, there has to be some law and order at night, doesn't there?
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with that. There's no question about that. And I think what's important, what we need to do moving forward, is to recognize that there's a tale of two protests. You have legitimate, quote unquote, legitimate protesters, but you have a whole series of extremists out there, violent extremists, who are looking to cause as much damage as humanly possible to disrupt even the focus of the legitimate movement. And so yes, I'm concerned, and I speak to my friends, and I check up on all my law enforcement friends on a regular basis because I'm very much concerned about what's happening in the street, and we have to take control.
Maybe I'm an optimist, but there are things I haven't seen that have come out of this tragedy, even though God knows how many other scenes we've seen caught on video that have been pretty similar, unfortunately, to what happened to Mr. Floyd. I've heard police chiefs say they saw murder. And I'm not just talking about in Minnesota. I've seen it around the country. I've seen mayors saying the same thing. I'm seeing cops not just taking a knee because they see a camera around, but they relate to what the protesters are saying. I think that there is an appetite for not cosmetic, but meaningful change. Now, to me, these are phrases. You explain to the audience what they really mean. Qualified immunity. And also the idea of what's in a cop's jacket in terms of disciplinary reports not being buried there, but being transparent. Explain qualified immunity and what real transparency would look like, and whether or not you think it would make a real difference.
Well, first, let me point out the fact that we have to be careful that we don't squander this opportunity to really kick police reform, criminal justice reform into high gear. As you indicated, there are law enforcement professionals who run departments who, this is the first time ever, have come out and expressed their disgust and anger and demanded justice, demanded that their colleagues are arrested, prosecuted, and convicted. That tells you that there's something different about what's happening right now in the death of Mr. Floyd. What it is exactly, I'm not sure, but I think there's a wonderful opportunity. And as far as the immunity for police officers, there are many issues that come up that people who study some of the suggestions for police reform that concern them, and that is, it's really a second tier system that police officers enjoy. There are certain courtesies afforded police officers. There are certain exceptions that police officers get. We saw it in the Floyd case. We saw how long it took for there to be an arrest, even though probable cause was established almost immediately. There was still some reluctance to pursue criminally police officers. It's difficult for this system to do that. And there are other components of the system that need to be examined, need to be really reformed and changed and modified. And I think we have a golden moment, an opportunity right now because of the emotionalism of what's going on to do those things.
Well, I appreciate you sharing experience with our audience here. I don't know how this all ends, but as you said, there's an opportunity here. Let's hope this thing doesn't blow up in the next few days and make that opportunity an impossibility. But Detective Claxton, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back with more on RFL.